25 psychology tips to become mysterious and stop oversharing. Do you find yourself sharing intimate details about your life with a total stranger? Or maybe you look back on a conversation with a coworker and realize you were talking the entire time. We've compiled the best conversation tips to avoid oversharing and learn more about who you're talking to instead. Start by understanding why you overshare. Are you trying to impress people? Are you insecure and looking for validation? Or maybe you don't know how to read social cues. Pay attention to how people react. Are they eager to hear more?
Or are they looking away, checking their phones? Read the room, folks. If you're always the one talking, you're probably oversharing.
Now I know what you're thinking. Dr. Phil, I can't just pause in the middle of a conversation. That'll be awkward. But here's the thing. It's not awkward if you do it right. A well-placed pause can make you seem more confident and in control. It shows you're taking the time to think, making your words more impactful.
Pause for 1 to 2 seconds before speaking. When we talk without thinking, sometimes we end up sharing more than we meant to. Before you launch into a story, take a moment to pause and think about what you're going to say. That way, you can think about what you'd like to say and avoid anything you don't want to talk about.
Most people are so busy thinking about what they're going to say next that they don't really listen to what the other person is saying. If you're not listening, you're not really connecting. And if you're not connecting, you're not building trust. Active listening is about more than just hearing the words someone is saying. It's about being present in the moment and giving the other person your undivided attention.
Practice active listening skills. Sometimes oversharing is a result of not listening to your conversation partner. Practice active listening skills by getting rid of distractions and making eye contact with the person you're chatting with. Think of follow-up questions to ask them so you can learn more about them and what they're saying. Great questions to ask during a conversation include, "Wow, what happened next?" Or, "How did that make you feel?"
Ask questions about the people you're with. Want to know the secret to being interesting? Be interested. People love to talk about themselves. Make a good impression by focusing on the other person. Ask about their lives, interests, and passions. Don't just ask superficial questions. Dig deep. You'll be amazed at what you learn.
Ask questions about the people you're with. It's important to learn a little bit about someone before you dive into the details of your own life. To avoid oversharing, ask questions about the other person's occupation, living situation, and hobbies. That way, they can share more about themselves, and you can both learn a thing or two about each other. So, how long have you lived in the area? What's your favorite way to relax on the weekends? Do you have any pets?
Change the topic of conversation. If you find yourself oversharing, steer the conversation in a different direction. Do this subtly with a natural segue, or be more direct. For example, say, "Speaking of bad timing, did you hear about mutual friend?"
Change the topic of conversation. Maybe a conversation is headed in a direction that carries a lot of emotional weight for you. If you don't want to talk about something, relationship problems, past trauma, grief, etc., casually change the subject by giving them a compliment or pointing out something about your environment. "I love your hoodie. Where'd you get it?" "Whoa, look at that rose bush. Those colors are so vibrant. Aw, check out that cute dog over there. I'd love to get a dog like that one day."
Set clear boundaries for yourself before you start talking. Before you go into any social situation, think about what you're comfortable sharing and what you're not. Having these boundaries in place will help you stay on track and avoid oversharing.
Set clear boundaries for yourself before you start talking. In your head, make a list of topics that you don't want to talk about with an acquaintance or a stranger. When you find yourself veering toward those subjects, use the methods above to avoid them. That way, you can stop yourself from oversharing from the get-go. For instance, you might avoid talking about your own relationship or any family drama that's happening with you right now.
Look, we've all been there. You're feeling down, so you log onto social media to scroll through your feed, and what do you see? Pictures of people on vacation, celebrating engagements, announcing new jobs, and suddenly you're feeling even worse. When you're feeling emotional, the last thing you need is to be bombarded with other people's highlight reels. So do yourself a favor and put down the phone. Go do something that makes you happy.
Avoid social media when you're feeling emotional. Oversharing doesn't always happen in person. When you're upset, you might find that you post things you normally wouldn't on your social media accounts. To avoid oversharing on social media, log out of your accounts anytime you're feeling overwhelmed or distraught. That way you won't be tempted to tell people things online that you don't actually want to share.
Now let's get real for a minute. Oversharing isn't just about being a chatterbox. It's often a symptom of something deeper.
It could be a sign of insecurity, a need for validation, or even a trauma response. If you find that you're constantly oversharing, it's important to figure out what's driving that behavior.
Ever notice how easy it is to overshare with strangers? It's like there's this unspoken agreement that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. When you're never going to see someone again, there's a certain freedom in being able to let your guard down and be yourself. But that freedom can be dangerous because when you overshare with someone you don't know well, you're giving them ammunition that they can use against you later.
There's a false sense of intimacy between you two. Do you find yourself sharing intimate details of your life to your hairdresser or nail technician? When someone is in your personal space, or you spend a lot of time together, you might feel like you're closer than you actually are. However, just because this person is inside your bubble, or you see them every month, doesn't mean that you two are actually close.
We live in a world where it's easy to feel judged. Whether it's your clothes, job, or relationship status, it seems like everyone has an opinion. For some, that judgment is paralyzing, so they retreat into themselves, sharing true thoughts with a select few. Then they meet someone new who makes them feel safe and they spill their guts.
You don't feel as judged by strangers. Maybe you overshare to the person you're next to on a flight, or you tell funny stories from your past to the person you're sitting next to in a waiting room. When you know it's unlikely that you'll ever see that person again, you feel better oversharing with them because they can't judge you as much as a friend or family member could.
Listen, I get it. You've met someone new and you're excited. You want to spend every moment with them. But relationships take time. You can't force intimacy. Trying to fast-track can backfire. Oversharing early leaves you vulnerable and gives them power to hurt you.
You're trying to fast-track the relationship. When you meet someone cool for the first time, you probably want to get to know them, and fast. However, that getting to know you stage is important. Instead of learning more about who they are and what they like to do for fun, you might overshare personal details of your own life to build a relationship super quickly.
Social anxiety can manifest in many different ways. Some people become withdrawn and avoid social situations altogether. Others put on a brave face and try to blend in, but they're constantly worried about saying or doing the wrong thing. And then, there are those who overshare as a way to fill the silence and avoid awkward pauses in conversation.
You have social anxiety. Social anxiety is more than just being shy. If you're a socially anxious person, you might be so afraid of being judged by others that it clouds your ability to read social cues. Social anxiety might make you overshare, especially to strangers, so that you can avoid uncomfortable silences and awkward moments.
People with ADHD often have trouble with impulse control, which can lead to oversharing. They may blurt out whatever comes to mind without thinking about the consequences. If you have ADHD, it's important to be aware of how your condition can impact your communication style.
You have attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. ADHD can cause poor impulse control and hyperactivity, especially during conversations. If you're excited about the topic, or you're having a great time talking to someone, you might find that you overshare without realizing it until later.
We've all been there. You're feeling emotional, so you log onto social media to vent. But before you hit post, ask yourself this: is this something I want the whole world to know? Because once you put something out there on the internet, it's there forever. When you're feeling emotional, it's best to talk to someone you trust in person.
You're feeling emotional, especially on social media. Emotions can drive our actions if we let them. You might find that when you're feeling down in the dumps or angry about something, posting on social media makes you feel better. It's a way to reach out to others for support without directly asking for it.
Some people are natural caretakers. They're always looking for ways to make others feel comfortable and supported. And while there's nothing wrong with being compassionate, it's important to set boundaries. You don't have to overshare your own experiences in order to make someone else feel better.
You're trying to make someone else feel comfortable. Maybe you're not the one who started oversharing in the first place. Maybe your conversation partner just revealed some childhood trauma or a deep-seated phobia. You may feel like you have to share intimate details about yourself so the other person doesn't feel awkward.
Look, I'm all for being open and honest, but there's a difference between being authentic and oversharing.
When you overshare, you're not just putting yourself out there, you're putting yourself at risk. You're risking your relationships, your reputation, and even your safety. Because the truth is, not everyone is going to be receptive to your life story.
Think about a time when someone shared something with you that made you feel uncomfortable. Maybe it was too personal, too soon, or maybe it was just plain inappropriate. Whatever the reason, it probably made you want to run for the hills. Now imagine how you would feel if you were on the receiving end of that oversharing on a regular basis.
It can make others feel uncomfortable. Maybe the person you're talking to doesn't feel comfortable enough with you yet to share details about their own life. Or maybe the topic you're talking about isn't one they feel okay discussing. Oversharing might make your conversation partner feel awkward, and they may not know how to handle the situation.
When you're constantly bombarded with information, it can be overwhelming. And that's especially true when that information is personal and emotionally charged. If you're always the one doing the sharing, it can start to feel like a one-sided relationship.
It can make other people feel drained or overwhelmed. Hearing about someone else's personal trauma or life story can make other people feel tired. It can take a lot of emotional energy to ask the right questions and be empathetic, especially to a person they don't know that well.
In today's digital age, it's more important than ever to be mindful of what you share online. Because once you hit post, it's out there for the world to see. And that includes potential employers, romantic partners, and even future friends.
It can leave a digital footprint online. Whenever you post something on the internet, it's there forever, even if you delete it. Oversharing about your life can negatively impact your job prospects in the future, so it's good to stay conscious about what you're posting and how potential employers might see it.
So how can you tell if you're oversharing? Here are a few telltale signs.
You find yourself sharing personal information with people you don't know very well. You often regret things you've said in social situations. You're constantly worried about what other people think of you.
One of the biggest signs of oversharing is when you're doing all the talking and the other person barely gets a word in edgewise. If you find that you're constantly dominating conversations, it's a good indication that you're not really interested in what the other person has to say. And that's a shame, because everyone has a story to tell.
You don't know much about the people you're talking to. When we overshare, we tend to talk about ourselves more than we let other people talk. If you look around the room and realize that you don't know much about anyone else, it's likely that you've been overhearing a bit too much.
Look, I get it. Small talk can be boring, but it serves an important purpose. It helps to break the ice and build rapport. It allows you to get to know someone gradually, without feeling like you have to reveal your entire life story in one sitting. When you skip small talk and jump right into deep, personal conversations, it can be off-putting. It's like showing up to a party and immediately launching into a dramatic monologue.
You tend to skip small talk. Small talk gets a bad reputation, but it's actually super important. If you find yourself skipping over the "what do you do for work?" or "how do you like living in the area?" conversations, you may be oversharing a bit. These baseline interactions are appropriate for people we don't know well, and it helps build a solid relationship that can grow at a normal pace.
One of the best ways to avoid oversharing is to be present in the moment. That means really listening to what the other person is saying and responding authentically. If you're so busy planning out your next witty remark, you're going to miss out on the nuances of the conversation.
You're always planning out what you're going to say next. Instead of listening to the people around you, you might find yourself thinking about the story you're going to share, or the tidbit you want to talk about. While we all plan out what we're going to say to some extent, doing this probably means you aren't giving your full attention to your conversation partner. Planning the conversation also means you're giving them a scripted version of you, rather than a present version of you speaking from the moment.
There's a time and a place for everything, and the workplace is not the place to be sharing your personal problems. When you overshare at work, you're not only putting yourself at risk, you're putting your job at risk. Because the truth is, your boss doesn't want to hear about your relationship drama, or your latest medical diagnosis.
You're talking about yourself in a professional setting. When it comes to sharing things about yourself at work, less is always more. If you're at work or a networking event and you find yourself sharing intimate details about yourself, you're likely oversharing.
At the end of the day, the best way to stop oversharing is to simply keep your mouth shut. Here is 3 tips to stop telling people your business. Tip 1. Stopping yourself from speaking your mind. 1. Imagine speaking your first thoughts, but don't actually say them. When you're just starting out with keeping your mouth shut, it can be difficult to not respond when you want to. To help you get over this, think about what you were going to say and imagine how the conversation would play out. Then don't say what you were going to. This is a really effective technique if you get emotional or upset and your immediate urge is to respond. 2. Write down your thoughts instead of speaking. If you still have a difficult time keeping your mouth shut, try writing down your thoughts in a journal. Sometimes just putting your thoughts down is enough to remove the feeling like you have to talk. Then, you can throw away what you wrote or use the note to phrase what you're planning to say. For example, your note might say, "Why did you schedule that party without asking me? You're thoughtless sometimes." Then, throw the note away without saying that, or respond by saying, "I wish you hadn't scheduled the party without talking with me first." 3. Practice active listening. Pay attention to not only what the person is saying, but how they're saying it. Look for nonverbal cues, such as their facial expressions or what they're doing with their hands. You'll have a better idea of what they're trying to communicate, and they'll feel more comfortable speaking if they know you won't cut them off. For example, if you ask someone if they'd like to babysit your kids and they say, "I'm not sure if I can," don't interrupt them. If they're also frowning and fiddling with their hands, you may tell that they feel uncomfortable with the idea and you shouldn't press them on it. Focus on bringing a non-judgmental feeling to that conversation. Make sure that they know that you're there to listen and be supportive. 4. Try meditative practices to calm your mind. When someone else is talking, try not to think about what you're going to say. Instead, train your mind to become more peaceful and present in the moment. You might try meditation, yoga, reading, walking or jogging, painting. Tell us what you think. Tip 2. Recognizing when to be silent. 1. Keep quiet instead of complaining or whining. If you tend to speak out about everything and everyone that bothers you, others will begin to see you as a whiner. You might lose some respect and people will be less likely to listen to you. This is especially true if you tend to complain about things that you can't change, such as the weather. 2. Hold your tongue if someone is being rude or thoughtless. Everyone has off days where they're short-tempered or just going through something challenging. Instead of getting mad or calling the person out, let them say what they need to and try to be kind. The person might feel bad about their behavior later, and they'll appreciate that you didn't highlight their poor behavior. 3. Leave gossip to other people. Whether you're around the water cooler or in the hallway between classes, resist the urge to talk about others behind their backs. People are less likely to trust you if they know that you frequently gossip and you might say something hurtful or get into trouble. It's better to stop gossiping altogether. Remind yourself why gossiping is harmful. The information you're sharing could be inaccurate, or it might make someone angry, for instance. 4. Stop yourself if you're angry and going to say something harmful. It's easy to lash out when you're mad about something, but you're more likely to create conflict if you react in anger. It's much better to not say anything than to say something you'll regret. It's also a good idea to keep your mouth shut if saying something would only make another person really angry. Tip: if you tend to talk more and say hurtful things when you drink, try to quit drinking or only drink when you're around people that you really trust. 5. Hold off on speaking if you're negotiating a deal or making a plan. Keep sensitive information to yourself, especially if it involves other people's decisions. Don't discuss details about a new hire, offer you've been given, or group project you're working on, for instance. Others might not like that you're telling people what's happening, especially if plans aren't final yet. You'll also feel silly if things don't work out like you'd said. For example, instead of saying, "I'm going to be the lead in the play because I don't think anyone else has the experience," stay quiet until you know the outcome of casting. 6. Stay silent instead of bragging about yourself. No one likes to listen to someone talk about their own accomplishments, so don't always bring the focus of the conversation back to yourself. People will appreciate your actions more if someone else mentions them and praises you for them. For example, don't say, "I was the one who closed the big deal, so you all have me to thank." If you don't say anything, another person might mention the part you played in the success, and it will look better coming from someone else. 7. Keep quiet if you don't know the answer to something. If you're in the habit of talking too much, you probably answer questions that you don't even know the answer to. Make an effort to stop doing this. Most people can tell that you don't know what you're talking about, and you're wasting everyone's time if you can't move the conversation forward. If you find that you must answer, you can say, "I don't know much about this. Does anyone else have any ideas?" 8. Appreciate silence instead of talking to fill it. If no one's speaking and people look slightly uncomfortable, just wait for someone else to talk. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but you'll be able to keep your mouth shut if you practice. Another person might be thinking of something to say, or they may be building the courage to join the conversation. Tip: if you have a hard time holding your tongue, count silently in your head. You might give yourself 3 minutes before saying something, for instance. 9. Avoid oversharing with strangers. If you frequently interact with strangers, it can be tricky to know when you're talking too much. Pay attention to how much personal information you share with people you don't really know. You can still be friendly without telling them everything about your life. You should also watch the other person's reaction. For example, if you're talking too much, they may look away, appear bored, or try to walk off. This is also true with acquaintances that you don't know very well. People can feel put off or overwhelmed if you give them too much info about yourself. Tip 3. Knowing when to speak up. 1. Give yourself time to think before you talk. Instead of chattering and saying everything that crosses your mind, try to speak with intention. Mentally decide what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. 2. Ask questions instead of chatting. If you talk too much, you're probably not asking questions, or you're not giving people enough time to answer. You'll have a more fulfilling conversation if everyone is interacting and responding with each other. Ask a meaningful question and then wait until the person actually responds. Don't interrupt or answer the question for them. Asking questions is especially important in meetings, negotiations, or class. 3. Speak if you can add value to the conversation. Genuinely listen to others and ask yourself if you're contributing to the conversation. If someone else has already said what you were going to say, there's no need to repeat it. Wait to talk until you can say something that's useful or enlightening. The more you practice this, the more people will value what you have to say.
Above all, when you do choose to speak, people will be more likely to listen to what you have to say. Practice these tips to become more mysterious and stop oversharing. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more insightful videos.